Welcome to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where each week we'll bring you the analysis from the latest news and headlines around the military and veterans communities. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times. 2020 had no shortage of headlines for us: a presidential election, a presidential impeachment, and a global pandemic that upended military and civilian lives across America. But amid all that, there were also some pretty big military stories that shouldn't be forgotten as we move into 2021. I've got a panel here today to help highlight some of those stories and discuss why they still matter. With me are Andrew Tillman, our executive editor, Howard Altman, our managing editor, and Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief. Good to see all of you here, at least virtually in this new setup. Howard, let's start with you. What's a major military story from the past year that got swept away by some of the other big headlines?
Well, one of the biggest stories all year took place almost a year ago, back in January 3rd, the morning of January 3rd, Baghdad time. Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Commander Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi, the deputy commander of the Popular Mobilization Front, and a Shia umbrella group of Shia militia groups in Iraq, were killed in a U.S. airstrike. That was a controversial move, taking out a foreign military commander. Several days later, on January 8th, the Iranians, as most people expected, retaliated, lobbing about a dozen ballistic missiles at two bases in Iraq housing U.S. military personnel. Initially, President Donald Trump sloughed the injuries off as headaches. Turned out that more than 100 troops had mild traumatic brain injuries. Tensions are continuing in the region. The Nimitz carrier group is in the Persian Gulf right now, ostensibly to cover the drawdown of U.S. troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. But at the end of November, there was an assassination of a key Iranian nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, widely believed to be carried out by the Israelis. Tension remains. The Iranians will likely respond in some way. I talked to some folks at U.S. Central Command. They're mildly optimistic that there won't be a response against U.S. troops. But what the Israelis do remains to be a wild card. Also, don't forget to watch out for that January 3rd anniversary of the killing of Soleimani. Now, one silver lining here is that with the Iranians wanting President-elect Joe Biden to bring the U.S. back to the table on the negotiations for the nuclear arms deal, the Iranians may tamp down whatever kind of response they might be thinking about. So that's one silver lining of that.
Thanks, Howard. Yeah, that feels like that Iranian killing was 5 years ago at this point. So, Andrew, I know you wanted to talk about issues surrounding the Guard and some of the missions they've had this year.
Yeah, I think we really, in some ways, amid all the other stuff going on in 2020, we underappreciated the incredible stream of headlines about Guard and Reserve mobilizations. They, were supporting hurricane relief and wildfires like they have in the past. But this year they were also doing coronavirus response. Just a few weeks ago, they were supporting some of the elections. And the biggest one was this summer. There was a lot of deployments for domestic security in response to the Black Lives Matters protests all across the country. And I think that, for one, that could raise issues about retention in the future. But more importantly, I think that the domestic security issues really raise some pretty big questions about what is the role of the Guard and Reserve here at home and as a part of the broader force. A few years ago, we had a lot of conversations about the role of the Guard and Reserve and whether we wanted to have a strategic reserve like we had during the Cold War that was essentially only going to mobilize if we went to war with Russia. And then after 9/11, we had what we call an operational reserve, where reservists could expect to mobilize very regularly. And now I think heading into 2020, we're going to have some real questions about what is the role of the Guard and Reserve here at home?
It certainly doesn't seem like the Guard missions are going to decrease anytime soon. So, Megan, I know that you wanted to talk about another topic related to Fort Hood and some of the scandals and controversies we saw there.
So this kind of presents as an Army story, but of course, the Army had a junior enlisted soldier go missing at Fort Hood in April. She was female. She had told her family that she'd been suffering some sexual harassment at work, and she didn't think that she could report it because she didn't want to be retaliated against or in best case scenario, just dismissed. The Army initially went searching for her, and then, as they normally do, they marked her as AWOL when she still couldn't be found. Her family started an online social media campaign saying she didn't go missing, she isn't AWOL, she didn't leave, something happened to her. And after a couple months, the Army was able to retrace its steps and find her body buried a few miles away from Fort Hood. They arrested someone in connection with it. A soldier who was a suspect in the case killed himself when the police confronted him. So that criminal case is ongoing. But this whole issue, the disappearance of Vanessa Guillen, turned into a catalyst for the Army to look at its sexual assault, sexual harassment response and prevention program. And just yesterday, they released the results of an independent investigation that was done at Fort Hood. But anybody who has read the Fort Hood investigation could tell you this could be anywhere in the Army, where there's widespread sexual assault and sexual harassment going on, and even more widespread distrust of the chain of command to handle it if somebody comes forward with it. They briefed that to Congress. In the past few weeks, Congress will have its eye on how they respond to it. But it could signal a little bit of a sea change in the Army. Hopefully it does, for all of the military services, that these programs that they put in place, like the SHARP program, like the SAPR program for the rest of the services, may have the best intentions, but it all matters. The only thing that matters is how commands carry it out and the response that they take when something goes wrong. And it's very clear from this research, and then from all of the feedback from service members who've read it or who have heard about it, that something is wrong here. It's not working. They may have all this stuff in place, but commanders and senior NCOs, people all the way down the chain of command, are not taking it seriously.
Well, look, we'll be watching that. I know the guard issue is going to come up again. We'll be keeping close tabs on that. There's a lot more we could have gotten into today. The Bonhomme Richard fire, the Afghanistan troop drawdowns, the entire firing of the Theodore Roosevelt's captain, how the ship handled coronavirus problems. But we're going to have to leave it there for now. You can read all about these stories and more on militarytimes.com. And be sure to tune in again right here next week when we'll take a look ahead into 2021 and the major stories our reporters will be tracking in the coming year. Thanks. We'll see you then.